Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. The widespread protests in Iran that were sparked by a cost of living crisis have proven to be one of the biggest challenges to the government in Tehran. But what started as a cost of living protests have been hijacked by other interests that appear to be more keen on bringing about a regime change than in addressing the day-to-day problems of the common Iranian people. In fact, the Iranian government has been categorical. It is accusing the American CIA and the Israeli Mossad for pulling the strings for the violence that is happening on the streets of Iran. Now, Trump, who had threatened that American missiles are locked and loaded, pulled back at literally the last minute. Vladimir Putin, interestingly, dialed up the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and also the Iranian President Pezeshkian one after another and has offered to mediate. But the obvious question is this: has Iran finally managed to crush the street protests, or is this just the calm before the storm, as the Americans are now moving their super carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group of warships, from the South China Sea to West Asia? Our next report tells you more.
This is the scale of arson and violence that was wreaked by the protesters on the streets of Iran. Private vehicles, government buildings, banks and even mosques have been vandalized and set on fire by the protesters, who claim that they were protesting against a cost of living crisis. But the protests that had started peacefully soon acquired a completely different dimension. The attention shifted from the violence that was being wreaked on Iran to what the American president, Donald Trump, would do next.
Did Arab and Israeli officials convince you to not strike Iran?
Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself. You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings. That had a big impact.
Despite the de-escalation in rhetoric, the Americans are moving their supercarrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, and its group of strike warships to West Asia. Saudi Arabia and Qatar engaged in urgent discussions with Washington, warning of broad destabilization in West Asia should US forces intervene militarily. Israel also joined the diplomatic and military preparations, with intelligence chief David Barnier visiting the US for discussions about the situation in Iran. Sensing his opportunity, the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who has spent close to 5 decades in exile in the United States after the ouster of his father in the Iranian Revolution, has thrown his hat into the ring.
What's clear is both the public and members of the military see me as a national figure who can unite all opposition forces from every background, ethnicity, Republican and monarchist, right, left, and everything in between. I have a comprehensive plan for an orderly transition which is ready to be implemented immediately. The Iranian people are taking decisive actions on the ground. It is now time for the international community to join them fully.
Iran has shut down the internet and also its airspace for most flights unless they fly with prior permission. A systematic crackdown has been conducted on anyone found resorting to violence and arson on the streets of Iranian cities. Recognizing the legitimacy of the cost of living crisis, the Ayatollah has said that the Iranian government will talk to anyone who wants to talk, but rioters and those committing arson will be dealt with firmly.
We talk to the protesters. They should talk. The authorities should talk to the protesters, but there is no point in talking to the rioters. The rioters should be put in their place.
On their own, the street protests appear to have failed in bringing about a regime change in Iran. But everything now depends on the scale of direct American involvement.
Moscow has ratcheted up its attacks on Ukraine, hitting it with daily drone and missile barrages. The relentless assault has targeted energy infrastructure and has cut off power and heating in the depths of this very harsh winter. On the 14th of January, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky underscored the gravity of the situation by declaring a state of emergency in the country's energy sector. A couple of days earlier, Russia had said that its forces had launched massive strikes on the Ukrainian energy and military industrial infrastructure with precision-guided munitions and drones, while Ukraine had reported that its troops had attacked a Russian drone factory. Our next report tells you more.
On the 12th of January, Russian Defense Ministry said in a briefing that over the past 24 hours, Russian military forces targeted over 150 Ukrainian sites, including ammunition depots, fuel warehouses, and temporary deployment points for Ukrainian troops and foreign mercenaries. In addition to this, the ministry claimed that the Russian forces had also shot down multiple Ukrainian drones in Rostov and Belgorod regions. The next day, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia had launched nearly 300 drones, 18 ballistic missiles, and 7 cruise missiles targeting his country's energy infrastructure. The Russian belligerents triggered power outages in several regions, including in Ukrainian capital Kyiv and Odessa. According to the mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, the situation in the Ukrainian capital is especially difficult, on a scale not seen in almost 4 years of the Russia-Ukraine war. As temperatures in Kyiv fell below -15 degrees Celsius, some 400 housing blocks in Kyiv have been without heating for several days. A massive Russian bombardment on the 9th of January had initially left more than half of the capital without heat and light.
Right now, the situation is the most difficult of the entire war in terms of energy supply and heating in several major regions. Because of this tactic of strikes focused on specific regions, which we talked about, a truly very large number of people are suffering at the moment, especially if you factor in the weather, when it's -15 outside and the strikes hit heating systems that are supposed to provide heating for 3 million people. The goal is clearly very simple, to actually drive large Ukrainian cities, the capital, Odessa, Dnipro, into a man-made catastrophe, into an absolute crisis, simply to drive them into as much crisis as possible. They are not succeeding, but they are trying.
В них не виходить, але вони намагаються.
Following the Russian salvo, authorities in Kyiv and the surrounding region have rolled out emergency power cuts, besides setting up 1,200 emergency warming centers, tents where people can warm up, charge devices, and get hot food and drink. After taking stock of the situation on Wednesday, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, while announcing the appointment of former Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal as Minister of Energy to address the situation, declared that the country's energy sector is in an emergency situation.
Denis Shmyhal has been appointed First Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy of Ukraine. His key task is to deal with the emergency situation currently affecting the energy sector due to Russian strikes and harsh winter weather. The state of emergency in the energy sector will be legally implemented, which will provide more options. The Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine will streamline to the maximum everything related to connecting backup energy equipment to the grid.
A day after, the Russian President Vladimir Putin, after receiving credentials from 34 newly appointed ambassadors to Russia, emphasized that Moscow needs guarantees of its security as part of a prospective peace deal in Ukraine.
We must proceed from the premise that security must be truly universal, and therefore equal and indivisible, and it cannot be ensured for some at the expense of the security of others. Disregarding this basic, vital principle has never led to anything good. This was clearly demonstrated by the crisis around Ukraine, which became a direct consequence of years of ignoring Russia's legitimate interests and a deliberate course of creating threats to our security, of advancing the NATO bloc towards Russian borders, contrary to the public promises given to us. I'd like to emphasize this.
Zelensky has accused Moscow of deliberately exploiting the harsh winter conditions as part of its war strategy. But his American counterpart, Donald Trump, on Wednesday, had blamed Zelensky for holding up talks to secure a peace deal to end the nearly 4-year-long war. While a peace deal has proven elusive so far, the long-suffering Ukrainians, in all likelihood, seem destined for many more frigid, sleepless nights, fraught with anxiety and danger.
Protests flared up in the Democrat stronghold of Minneapolis after the US President Donald Trump threatened to invoke an emergency law to quell the unrest. It's been nearly about a week since the ICE shot and killed 37-year-old woman Renee Nicole Good. Another person has been shot and wounded by a federal immigration agent in the state of Minneapolis. Now, according to the Minneapolis police chief, the shooting was the result of a struggle between an ICE agent and a man that he was trying to apprehend. The Department of Homeland Security has identified the wounded man as an illegal immigrant from Venezuela, though the man himself has suffered a non-life-threatening gunshot wound to his leg. Concerns about the tactics used by ICE have raised questions about the security of local civilians.
The President of the United States, Donald Trump, has threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act in Minnesota after a week of growing unrest in the state. According to his post on Truth Social, Trump stated, "If the corrupt politicians of Minnesota don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists from attacking the patriots of ICE, who are only trying to do their job, I will institute the Insurrection Act." The Insurrection Act is a centuries-old law that would allow the deployment of U.S. troops to the state of Minnesota. Trump had previously threatened to invoke the law in 2020 in response to the protests in Portland after the brutal killing of George Floyd. It's been nearly just a week since the ICE shot and killed a 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good. Another person has been shot and wounded by a federal immigration agent in the Democratic stronghold of Minneapolis on Wednesday. According to the Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara, the late Wednesday shooting resulted from a struggle between an ICE agent and a man he was trying to apprehend. He further added that during the struggle, the federal agent discharged his weapon, striking one adult male. While the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, has said that Minnesota's authorities have no jurisdiction on the investigation of the killing, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, has insisted on no further help from the federal government.
We do not need any further help from the federal government. To Donald Trump and Kristi Noem, you've done enough.
ICE out now! ICE out now!
The shooting of Nicole Good on the 7th of January has led to protests all over the U.S., with protesters chanting slogans against ICE. Thousands took to the streets of Minneapolis, creating widespread anger against the use of brutal force in the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. While the gathering of people started as a vigil offering flowers and candles for her, several of them turned into demonstrations that led to physical altercations between residents and the ICE agents. In retaliation, federal immigration officers, armed with pepperball guns and tear gas, wrestled several protesters to the ground.
I want the federal government out of Minnesota. I want the federal government out of Minneapolis. I want the border guard to be at the border. They are 300 miles south of the border. They have no business here, tear gassing high school students, abducting strangers. It's completely racist. People with brown eyes, they're horrified. First graders are getting off of the school bus and their mothers are gone.
While Trump has blitzed Minneapolis with thousands of ICE agents under the Operation Metro Surge in order to deport illegal immigrants, Minnesota has witnessed a surge in the shootings and killings by those agents. On Wednesday, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said that the city is in an impossible situation and that this is not the path that America should be following.
There's still a lot that we don't know at this time, but what I can tell you for certain is that this is not sustainable. This is an impossible situation that our city is presently being put in. And at the same time, we are trying to find a way forward, to keep people safe, to protect our neighbors, to maintain order. And we're in a position right now where we have residents that are asking the very limited number of police officers that we have to fight ICE agents on the street, to stand by their neighbors. We cannot be at a place right now in America where we have two governmental entities that are literally fighting one another.
While Noam told reporters at a White House press briefing that it's up to Trump if he decides to invoke the law, demonstrations against ICE in Minneapolis have stretched into the night in recent days.
More than 460 Palestinians have been killed and over 2,500 homes, businesses and other buildings of the Palestinians have been destroyed by Israel at a time when the Donald Trump imposed ceasefire in the Gaza Strip is in existence. And this week, the United States has said that the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire has begun and has also established its Board of Peace for the Gaza Strip, with luminaries such as the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair of the Iraq invasion fame and Marco Rubio as its founding members and Donald Trump himself as its chairman. The media's attention has turned away from the Gaza Strip, but the situation of the starving, besieged Palestinians still remains very dire in this biting winter cold. So what can the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip expect from this phase 2 of the Faux Ceasefire? Our next report tells you more.
The world's cameras have turned away. In the biting cold of the winter, Palestinians are living in catastrophic conditions that are hard to imagine. As a rainstorm sweeps over the Gaza Strip, an overwhelming majority of the Palestinians, who now live in threadbare tents because Israel bombed their homes to rubble, are struggling to survive.
Last night, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like this on ordinary days. I've never seen anything like it. We were drowning. Our clothes that we had became wet. We have nothing to wear. We are children. We want. Our 2 mattresses were soaked. Our covers were soaked. Our pillows that we sleep on were soaked. Our tent is filled with water.
The Trump-imposed ceasefire exists only in name. The Israeli missiles still continue to fall, albeit with reduced intensity. Israel has continued with its attacks on targets that it claims are Hamas, but inflicts enormous collateral damage on the Palestinians. This funeral from Deir al-Bala is for 10 Palestinians who were killed in an Israeli bombing on a dense tent encampment where the Palestinians have taken refuge. Despite Donald Trump claiming that there is a record amount of humanitarian aid being allowed into the besieged Palestinian territory, the conditions of the Palestinians remain dire, and they are skeptical of what Phase 2 of Donald Trump's ceasefire will bring.
What second phase or first phase are they talking about? They haven't even started the first phase yet. How can they start with the second? They've been bombing since this morning. They targeted Tufa and Zaytun. Houses are coming down. Which second phase? We don't want ink on paper. We want real action on the ground. We don't want it to be like every other time, just words on paper, and then things stay the same, or even get worse.
The Trump administration has named us Secretary of State Marco Rubio and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair as 2 of the founding members of its Board of Peace for Gaza, Trump's Middle East envoy. Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will also sit on the founding executive board. Trump will act as chairman of the board, which forms part of his 20-point plan to end the war between Israel and Hamas. It is expected to temporarily oversee the running of Gaza and manage its reconstruction. Under Phase 1, Hamas and Israel agreed to a ceasefire in October, as well as a hostage prisoner exchange. Steve Witkoff has said that Phase 2 will see the reconstruction and full demilitarization of Gaza, including the disarmament of Hamas and other Palestinian groups. But Israel, for its part, has said it will not pull out from more than 50% of the Gaza Strip that it now continues to hold from behind a shifting yellow line.
In a major achievement for the Nigerian security forces, more than 200 suspected members of an armed criminal gang were reportedly killed during coordinated operations in the Kogi state in central Nigeria over the weekend. The large-scale multi-agency offensive that started on the 10th of January and also led to the arrests, though the exact number of the apprehended bandits has not been confirmed. Now, according to the Kogi State's Commissioner for Information, efforts to hunt down those bandits who had fled were hampered as they used some of the civilians that they had abducted for ransom as human shields. In the massive operation that involved the different arms of Nigeria's security and paramilitary forces, several bandit camps were destroyed, dealing a major blow to the resurgence of bandits in central Nigeria. Our next report tells you more.
In northwest and central Nigeria, armed gangs, locally infamous as bandits, have for years preyed on rural communities. Raiding villages, kidnapping residents for ransom, and burning homes after looting them is their modus operandi. In recent months, there has been a surge in mass abductions, including attacks on schools, which have sparked nationwide outrage and prompted the government to intensify security efforts. In the month of November, in one of the largest mass kidnappings in Nigeria, gunmen had kidnapped more than 300 students and teachers in raids on 2 schools in the country. As a new wave of kidnappings gripped the nation, fearful and disappointed Nigerians demanded that the government do more to boost security.
I was sad. I felt betrayed. I felt like our government are not doing the right thing. I feel like they are not taking us important. We don't mean substantial things to them, you know. I just feel so bad. Because this is like history repeating itself. We've had the Chibok girls kidnapped over a while, and we knew what we went through as a whole nation to bring them back home and all of that. So seeing history repeat itself is so disappointing, you know.
50 of the abductees had escaped immediately afterwards, and around 100 schoolchildren were released in December. Last month, the authorities secured the release of the remaining pupils and teachers kidnapped from a boarding school in the Niger state. The neighboring Kogi state has, however, emerged as an insecurity hotspot recently. What makes it attractive to armed groups operating across state boundaries is its location, linking Nigeria's north and south through dense forest corridors. Security experts are of the opinion that the Kogi offensive follows a recent directive by President Bola Tinubu to top security officials to intensify efforts against the bandits. Subsequent to the directive, vigilante forces and civil defense personnel were deployed, along with the Nigerian security forces, in a bid to protect against the kidnapping threats. Consequently, schools, which were shut for nearly 2 months due to security concerns, saw students return to classrooms on Monday.
I feel safe going back to our school because I have teachers, I have elder ones that used to take care of us just the way they do in our house.
It's not an issue that you say you stop giving your child her own right to learn or to send her to school because you are afraid of her being kidnapped.
In addition to the menace of kidnapping gangs, the most populous African nation is plagued with security challenges on multiple fronts, including a 15-year-long Islamist insurgency in its northeast, separatist violence in the southeast, and frequent deadly clashes between farmers and herders in the central region. The challenge of this multiple-front war is daunting, especially for a frustrated and demotivated Nigerian security force, but the recent success, aided by critical military supplies by the United States, seems to have placed the Republic of Nigeria on the right track.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. If you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.